It's me, Crazy Wabbit. Welcome. I am going to do another React today. Today's React is from Star Citizen, the story so far. I've not seen it. I do know it's about an hour long, so grab yourself a drink. And I'm going to react to it as it goes. If I feel the video's any good, I'll upload it, and that's why you're seeing it now. Beyond that, drop anything in the comments. I do like to answer questions where possible. So without further ado, let's get on with it.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Jared.
If you were watching on Twitch, I apologize. Welcome to another episode of Star Citizen Live. I'm your host, Jared Huckabee. And if you've never seen Star Citizen Live before, it's where we take an indeterminate amount of time at the end of certain weeks to invite our developers on and answer questions from you, the Star Citizen community. On this week's show, we're going to take, I'm guessing, looking at the question, it's probably going to be about a 30 or 40 minute show. We'll see, in case you have somewhere to be. We have members of our esteemed narrative team, people who need no introduction, but I'm going to anyway. Dave and Will. Dave, how you doing?
I'm good. Good. How are you?
Good. Will?
That's my intro?
Look,
He's like, I want more.
Winners. And most of them won't be. Dave, Will, because somebody's show is everybody's first time.
Yep, sure.
Give me a second to parse that.
The mustache.
And somebody's last time.
The mustache does nothing for my performance. Tell everybody who you are and what you do for Star Citizen.
My name is Dave Haddock. I'm the narrative director here at CIG and work on Star Citizen, Squadron 42, basically work with the team to flesh out, build out the universe, write the dialogue, come up with characters, come up with storylines, fiction, lore, item descriptions, all sorts of fun stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm William Weisbaum, assistant narrative director. I do what Dave does, but just
backwards
a
and
little
in
smaller.
heels.
Yeah.
I jumped in there. So this week's show, we put up a thread on Spectrum as we normally do and collected questions. Before we get into the questions, I want to start. I want to do a lightning round of some of the questions. A lot of the questions that come in tended to be more feature related. Tended to be, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Why don't you do this? There are a lot of questions that all have variations of the same answer and whatnot. So we'll obviously be taking some questions from the chat here as well. So as to help guide those the chat questions, and to help explain to those who submitted questions in Spectrum and are like, well, why didn't they answer my question? It was voted up more. I want to talk a little bit about the difference between those questions and why the answer to almost all of them is pretty much the same. So some questions from the thing. Are there plans for any cutscenes in Star Citizen? I think we'd all love that kind of stuff. But those resources are currently tied up finishing Squadron 42, the cinematics team, the facial animation team.
I don't know if I'd want cutscenes or not.
Like that. And so that priority has to be there, because that game is one that absolutely requires that, and where Star Citizen, that's a nice to have kind of thing. Any plans to integrate the Galactopedia into Star Citizen, help players keep track of the ongoing narrative in the game? Yes, obviously something we'd all love very much, but that requires feature work and UI work. Again, both of those teams are working on not just finishing out Squadron 42, but bug fixing and optimizing the performance of the PU right now. So this year is a big push towards performance optimization and bug fixing. So we're really trying to hold back on introducing new features to the PU for at least a great portion of this year while we stabilize that. So again, something on the list, but is it more important than getting base building and crafting and our engineering finally in and stuff like that? So it'll be farther down the line, stuff like that. I thought Pyro Narrative had the planet strip mined. That's another thing where we had that story, that idea way back when the first version of Star Citizen, where planets would never be landable. You were never supposed to be able to land on planets. You would just kind of go to a unique landing zone and stuff. And now we have these fully realized 360-degree planets and stuff. So with that, paired with where Planet Tech is at any given time, we're still on Planet Tech V4. We're developing Planet Tech V5 right now. Means that these planets have to be realized in the tech that we have at the moment and stuff like that. So narrative.
Should we go?
Yeah. I'm doing the ones. I don't want you to. I'm setting a thing. I don't want you to have to tell people.
You're feeling like a third wheel.
Tell people why.
Less.
Can't happen right now.
Okay.
That's my job. That's and then just things like that. So basically, a lot of the questions that are why don't you do this now, or seem like some really obvious choices, like wouldn't it be so much better if you did this instead of this? The answer is almost always yes, and we agreed and we wanted to too. But the priorities of game development mean that other things take priority and other things have to come first and stuff like this. So with that. We're going to move. Wow, I'll go out really loud there.
So before they do, cutscenes in Star Citizen. Just thinking about it then, as they were talking about it, and to be honest, I don't think it would work. Like we've got characters where you go to them and they've got their facial animations and everything like that, and that's a good enough cutscene. I don't think we actually need to have cutscenes because it's just going to break the immersion. Just my thoughts on it. Let's carry on.
For some reason, I'm sorry. I haven't done one of these in a while. So with that, we're going to jump into actual questions that can be affected by narrative and stuff like that. So there's a number of things going on. I'm going to start with probably our most recent one, just for recency bias, the regen crisis. Was introduced in 4.1. Why don't you tell us what the regen crisis is?
So high level, was it 3 years ago? We had introduced this concept of regen. So it was a fictional way to justify why players are respawning. Came up with this lore behind it of the Abraham spheres and imprinting and stuff like that, and actually did it sort of in the timeline of the fictional universe. So it happened while players were playing. We introduced the tech. We kind of showed how the Imperator and the other people were kind of reacting to this type of thing. But now, basically, for whatever reason, the efficiency of the technology has been failing. So, spoiler, it's not affecting the players, but for the majority of the NPC population, the efficacy of the regen tech has been dropping significantly. So basically, death is now becoming a thing again. They thought they'd kind of conquered it, and now it turns out that they're not. So currently, the UEE and the Imperator are basically trying to scramble to figure out a solution to kind of research and science their way out of this predicament to hopefully try to restore the tech to its former glory.
And I'm anything you want to add to that?
No, like during the run up to it, the tests and stuff, like as much as they tested the technology before it came out, once you increase the sample size to several billion, it started really quickly like kind of showing the cracks, and all of a sudden all these people who thought they had their imprint safely stored away in a hospital because everyone went out and got their imprints to protect them, it wasn't until they put it to the test months later that they realized that the imprints had gone bad. And so it's kind of like, these small incidences of like, oh, this whole shipload of people got into a wreck and none of them came back, and like, that's weird. And then it started piling up to the realization of, oh, this technology is not as dependable as we first thought.
And you kind of ran into the thing too, where people were starting to, effectively get kind of cocky of like, oh, it doesn't matter, I can go and I can fly my ship into a wall and bounce back and everything will be okay. So not only is the samples pool increasing, but people could start abusing it, and basically over and over and over again. And again, that could kind of raise the failure rate.
Yeah, so turns out a large percentage of the population doesn't take well to imprinting. Maybe they only have one imprint, maybe none. And it's not like the player population, just like the player population is the part of the universe who owns spaceships and goes on these great adventures, they're also the part of the population that takes really well to imprinting, so for the most part.
And this is a story that, obviously we've just introduced it with 4.1. This is a story that will continue to be revealed and continue, and players will have more interactions with it and stuff as the months go by later this year.
Yeah. So, I mean, as we had sort of talked about in one of the Inside Star Citizens, the idea is like we're introducing these sort of ongoing storylines. And so this was sort of the inciting incident for what we're calling kind of our B story. So it's, the threat of the regen crisis is kind of looming, and it's sort of moving pieces around the board, whether it's corporate interests, government interests, stuff like that, to kind of make decisions that the players will get to kind of see as they kind of go throughout the universe.
Ancient Sales says, all this lore and background story over 14 years had zero representation of this in the PU. When is this content going to represent this? That's literally what the whole line in mind is for. That this is the reason you're going to these Hathor places and stuff, and the reason you're searching for these minerals and whatnot is to feed into Rayari.
Yeah, and there's going to be other ways that we're going to kind of start tying into this stuff a bit more, where players are going to be able to see the ramifications of it in the universe.
Yeah.
And hear NPCs discussing it and
yes, you'll start to see more NPCs coming online. Again, the answer to, I bring up Ancient Sales question because the answer to that is essentially the same as the answer for the first 3 questions of the show. It's basically those development resources need to become available for us in order to manifest this stuff more fully into the verse. And we'll have some chat later on about how we're going to do that.
They did mention that the NPCs would be talking. Some of that has started to come in. I have noticed more conversations that I'm hearing, sort of wild lines as I'm walking through the verse at the moment. So back to it.
Stuff like this. It's one of those things where we shouldn't stop creating story. Just like anything else, we shouldn't stop adding mining to the game. We shouldn't stop adding salvaging or combat or whatever. And the tools that allow us to make those things better will continue to develop as each patch goes on. The tools that will allow us to tell our stories better will continue to evolve as the patch goes on. Which the next question on here says, why doesn't the regen crisis affect the player?
I mean, it's mostly just for the fact that the players do need to respawn. I mean, regen still factors into the original Death of a Spaceman thing. So there is still that idea that your imprint kind of integrity will decay over time, and so we will still kind of feed it back into that original mechanic that Chris had talked about all those years ago. But it was mostly just the fact that it was players need to respawn otherwise.
Right now,
keep it in practical
state of our game and whatnot. There's we're being completely.
It'd be a bit too punishing.
We're being candid. The game is plenty punishing enough in a lot of places without us introducing this on top of that. Plus, again, that's new feature work and stuff. And as we've said since February of this year, like this isn't the year of too many new feature works. This is the year of stability and performances like this. Is the regen crisis a precursor to Death of Spaceman? Is this, when this storyline wraps, will it have some effect on Death of a Spaceman when it gets introduced?
I mean, don't want to spoil.
Fair enough. Stay tuned. Keep playing.
Yeah.
I tried. How does it make sense narratively that this major crisis with regen is largely ignored by the UEE and they expect a bunch of randoms to solve it for them instead by knocking down all Hathor sites with the fleet? So, what is the UEE doing?
I mean, they're doing a lot. It's mostly the thing of like the effects of what they're doing are probably behind closed doors. They're happening in other systems and stuff like that. Again,
we are limited to the Stanton Pyro system right now.
Yeah, so they're certainly up to a lot. Trying to incentivize corporations to find a solution and incentivizing the population to help the corporations in scientific research and finding the resources and stuff like that. It's just, again, it's a player-centric experience. So obviously, we're focusing on.
I mean, they're putting a lot of resources, the UE is putting a lot of resources into trying to fix this crisis. But the player isn't necessarily going to a UE research lab to seeing what they're doing.
No.
We're coming up with ways that the player can participate in this regen crisis.
And you will be, without spoiling, you will be going to some research labs. In the future, they may not be UEE research lab, but you're gonna be seeing what other people. Like we've heard what Rayari is doing. Mm-hmm. You're gonna start seeing what other factions and corporations are doing to attempt to address.
Yeah.
I wonder whether or not that means that it's going to be the mission that they first set out at CitizenCon a couple of years ago, where you go to the research thing and you do your secret agent business underneath the computers. If you remember seeing that.
Yeah, and the reason why Rayari has all these funds to spend on these rare resources that players are excavating right now is because the UEE is putting extra funding through Addison into researching how to fix this crisis.
Yeah. And for the regen crisis, is the player going to be focused on helping address it, or will players also have the chance to investigate why it's happening in the first place? What you can tell us without spoiling it, obviously.
Silence.
It's more like they're experiencing a crisis firsthand, and how to phrase this. We're going on a journey, and we really wanted the players to feel like they're part of this unfolding. And so whether there's going to be concrete answers or solutions at the end of this, we're going to leave it up because you're checking in with us halfway through.
Right.
So it's kind of a delicate position.
Well, not even halfway through. We barely got the first chapter. We barely got the first chapter of this out.
Well, and it's, again, sort of that idea of like Will said, that players are experiencing this as it's happening. So we're kind of starting to lay a groundwork of story continuity, which is, I think, a really exciting thing that we haven't really been able to do much before. We've been having a lot of kind of, Simpsons cycles where it's just sort of like the status quo gets kind of reset, but now we're actually kind of establishing that, if someone starts playing the game in 3 months, their experience to things, when talking to somebody who's been playing it this entire time is going to be a little different, because the people who've been playing this entire time go, oh, well, you should have seen it, and there was this regen tech, and it used to work, and now it doesn't work, and blah, blah, blah.
I mean, this year's focus on doing these regular patches, monthly patches, have really been interesting us from a narrative perspective on how we can tell our story. Because normally, like we're unfolding, previously we were doing the quarterly patches and stories were unfolding in a much greater amount of time, and how the players experienced it was kind of very different. But now we have a much more regular cadence, and so slowly like doing these little crumbs as we go and building into something bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I mean, we had 4 patches in 4 months. December, January, February, March. It's with Invictus being in the middle of May and whatnot. There's a 6-week gap instead of a 4-week gap there, and then our plan is to continue on that. So that's May patch, June patch, July patch, August patch, September patch. So you'll see drops of this going through throughout the year. So that's all part of this major change, this content-driven, less feature-driven directive for this year. Adamant One, I think I'm reading that right, in the chat says, why focus on storylines while still in alpha? And will any of these storylines repeat once 1.0 or full live release happens? You mentioned earlier, like when you introduced regen and the Ibrahim spheres, it was in time and place 3 years ago. And whatever, these are story moments of where we are now in our sliding time scale. Yeah. So it's these aren't things that just repeat.
Well, it's also that, I mean, it's also a thing too. I mean, some of the stuff I think, we had things like Siege of Orison, which were single events that we would repeat because it was a fun game experience and stuff like that. So I think it'll probably always be kind of a balance of that. Yeah.
Like A Line in Mine is kind of an evergreen location. It's meant to...
It's not an event.
It's not an event.
It's a permanent addition to the...
So we're trying to balance between these story moments that you're experiencing right now with repeatable content that will kind of live on.
Yeah, it's no different than any other MMO. When you play the level 10 quests and whatnot, they happen much earlier in the ongoing saga, but they're always still going to be there playable. So this content is designed to always be there.
Yes, I think for the most part, yeah.
In the groundwork that we're laying with this new content, even if there's a story mission attached to it, we're taking the content itself and figuring out how to reuse it in a repeatable, playable experience. So there might be more event-type stuff coming this year, but anything that we do, we're hoping to build into so that the players will keep getting to enjoy and have fun with.
I think what Adam might have been asking is this the 1.0 story, or is this something else? This is something else.
This is something else.
This is our 2025 storyline that we're...
And to his question, why? Why tell a story when you're in alpha?
Well, part of it is this is giving narrative a chance to be an alpha as well. We've been learning so much in this past 4 months of now that the mission tools are in, now that the streaming content tools in, that we've been able to really ramp up how we deliver. And you're going to be seeing that more this year. And we've run into issues that we've been able to sort out with this earlier content and explore it as we build up to our 1.0 content.
And it's a thing too. I mean, we've been working with the designers and stuff like that. Of part of it is that giving the narrative wrapping to why you're doing something makes the doing something a little bit more engaging. Mm-hmm. So part of it is again in this push for sort of greater engagement in the experience. It's let's add a story to it. So it's not just, hey, we introduced this thing, go have fun. It's there's a reason around doing it and driving players to go play.
Why not add another layer?
Yeah.
And I think it's a little bit of a thank you to the players who are playing it right now. You're playing in alpha, you're experiencing our game in development, and as part of that, you're getting to experience the regen crisis.
Simple fact is, if they don't put storylines in, then the game will get repetitive really fast. And they want a longevity like things like World of Warcraft, which has got various different seasons that's happened, various different things that have happened in the verse. It's absolutely a thing that you need to do in an MMO, especially if you want it to last a long time. So I totally get it.
Which players who hop into the bandwagon 3 years from now won't. So good for you.
Yeah. You said something. You said we're learning through this, and I don't think that gets. I mean, I've been doing this for a decade now, but I don't think I'll ever get tired. When I end the show, say, "What did we learn this week?" It's not. I'm not just speaking on behalf of the player and whatnot. Game development is this process of learning. Of this process, we've been learning for the last 13 years what this game that we're making is. You know, it's new people come in with new ideas, new technologies come on. We didn't think we were going to be able to have like 360 degrees fully realized planets and stuff like this. And we learn as much about how the game is changing and how to make this game every month as players learn alongside us, and that's the virtue of ISC and SCL and stuff like that. It's all of game development is about learning in one way, shape, or form, not just for the players, but for the people who are making the game. And I really liked when you said that, so I want to. And then last question about the regen crisis: is the current respawn issue in 4.1 part of the B story, or is it a bug? No, that's a bug.
I wish it was. That would have been clever of us.
The other big addition recently is our first Banu, our first alien of any kind.
Mr. Wicklow.
Tell me about Wicklow. Who is Wicklow?
He's a Banu?
He's a Banu.
All right, moving on. Tell me more about Wicklow.
So Wicklow is a new addition to Stanton's system. He is a fresh expatriate of the Banu Protectorate who has basically set up a shop. He divested from his Suli and has traveled around and he is fascinated and loves human culture, and so he decided to go set up a shop in Stanton's system where he will happily trade stuff, build stuff, send you on food lunch orders. He's great.
And why now? Where did this idea that this was the time to bring this first come from? What can you remember?
We were charged with, from a design side, they wanted, this person who would take in a random collection of resources from the player who didn't have like a set style or anything, because basically this is like tier -1 of crafting almost. Like when crafting comes online later on, you'll be taking those recipe lists and you'll be filling them and you'll be putting them into your own crafting station. But those things aren't ready yet. But we still kind of wanted that gameplay loop for the players to start experiencing it.
Go find materials, bring the materials, turn the materials into a new thing.
Into a thing. And so this is the person who's kind of doing that through this trading shop. And so we were kind of thinking of like, who would we do that? And we had been really wanting to get aliens because the Star Citizen is supposed to be populated by aliens. So we've been waiting for that opportunity. And so we kind of asked, we're like, maybe?
And of course, like the answers at the very beginning, like we have to implement it as far as we can with the tech and resources that we have right now. Obviously, a fully P-capped Banu running around saying, "Hey, what's over?" You know, it's like it's we're not quite ready to do that because those resources are tied up with that.
Well, it's just the yeah. I mean, we P-capped him. I mean, he is fully P-capped. Yeah. But yeah, like needing what is the animation rig, the walk
full
cycle,
custom rig for a Banu
is something that hasn't been made. I mean, again, even the sculpt from it was relatively quick because there had been sort of development on it, but not a real intensive like game ready asset made. So,
I mean, I think some very ingenious people found a way into Wicklow's room and discovered that Wicklow wasn't quite all there yet. So,
it was just literally a torso.
Currently a head and a torso that sits behind his desk talking to you. But that's going to develop more as we get more time to put him in. And hopefully one day he'll be walking around his emporium interacting with you is our long-term goals. So,
what Suli did Wicklow belong to in his past life?
I mean, I figure it was some kind of like fabrication Suli, because again, just that's what he's been trained on and he knows how to do. I actually don't know if we've ever really delved into like the naming conventions of Sulis, but
it's usually after the person,
the owner.
Right. The items Wicklow asks for don't seem very thematic. Can you explain why Wicklow wants these particular commodities? Seeing as he's a collector, I feel it would be more fitting if he requested rare loot from the loot pool or something like the artifacts and war medals you can find. For the ship rewards, you should have to turn in an in-game purchased one or an exact hangar ship. Basically, this person's got a lot of ideas. But basically, the question is why is Wicklow after these things that he is and not collectible items to add to his menagerie?
Because he's also a fabricator. He's not just a collector. He's also, producing his own items, and these rare resources are something that he desired, or maybe someone else wanted to trade with him. There's kind of several excuses. It's also partially in metagaming wise, it's the timing of his release is with the Mine and Line event. So we wanted something to tie it together with that. So it was kind of convenient.
And it's the intention with each patch that the things that he's looking for and asks for will change and stuff. In fact, in 411, we're introducing a guild script. A different like physicalized currency that players will find throughout the universe, and he'll accept those. Spoilers. It's my effing job.
It's also important to remember too that and this was one of the kind of beautiful benefits of him being a Banu is that he's kind of eccentric. So to me, the thought of him going, "Hey, I want you to bring me like 30 Pips cans, some Karenite, and a burrito," like made sense for him because it's just like he's kind of weird that way.
I mean, even for a Banu, I think he's on the eccentric end of things because he's living alone out in human space without a Suli, so it's kind of.
And for a little behind the scenes, I'll add one of the suggestions of this person was like, for vehicle rewards, you should be able to turn in one of the ones you've stolen and get it like this. He goes, we actually did look into that. We ran into a technical issue where the freight elevators couldn't destroy an item. So you load something in the freight. We actually intended to do something like that. You'd load it onto the thing, it would come down and come up with something else, but it kept coming up with the existing item, and you just kept duplicating stuff. So we inadvertently created our own asset duplication thing. So it's one of those things where it's like that aspect of it was not able to make in the initial release, but it is something we're still looking at. And for what and how it will be implemented, you'll find out when it's ready. But yeah, just again, it's another example of we're thinking the same things they're thinking. We're having the same conversations they're having. And the answer almost always to why didn't they just do that or whatever is the thing we needed to do that wasn't ready. And if we waited until every single thing was ready, we wouldn't be running a live environment in the middle of our development. This month's story element was twofold: Wicklow's arrival and the regen crisis. This person wants to know, they were both after the same minerals. They're both after the same resources in many ways. It's like, does people helping Wicklow, is it going to hurt Rayari? Is this, are people automatically bad for choosing to get their ship instead of helping the human race?
Yes. I mean, it is effectively a moral choice. So, but I mean, they're technically the same story. They're just two halves of it. So the sort of B story is the resource mining and stuff like that. But we just gave you two options of what you wanted to do with it. For people who didn't necessarily wanted to, even if they didn't necessarily want to give it to Wicklow, you had the option of going to Rayari. If you wanted the items instead of the money, you go to Wicklow. So.
And there's a good chance Wicklow's just trading them right back to Rayari for
100%
price. So
yeah.
As far as the stuff that we've seen in his menagerie, I can't even begin. There's no vowels in this person's name. Why does Wicklow have Tessa Bannister in a cryopod? Is that really Tessa? Is it a clone of Tessa?
that could be
I need to go
anybody
visit
with the
Tessa.
first name starts with a T, ends in Bannister.
Mm-hmm. So it might not be Tessa. Is what you're not willing to confirm
Could be
that that's
Tanya Bannister.
Tanya Bannister. You heard it here first. You're not willing to confirm that that's the
Confirm or deny.
Tessa.
Is this on record?
Yeah.
Oh, then no.
It's on the internet, and everybody knows you can't erase anything from the internet. I've tried. I once wore a Beefeater costume.
Millions of
Laws
people
Villainous,
searching for that right
a
now.
long-time viewer in the chat says nobody cares about NPCs. Give me my ships. It's a prudent course of action. All right, so region crisis, Wicklow's arrival. We've taken a break from the fight for Pyro at the moment. So let's we get back into that a little bit in this next Invictus patch. What's happening in Pyro with these three factions right now? Where are we at in their story at the moment?
Well, I guess just to fill in the fight for Pyro is we have the introduction of a new group called the Frontier Fighters, who have
I forgot what it was then.
who have a different take on the Pyro solution, right? Because we've established for a long time the Citizens for Prosperity, who are out there who are like, if we just resettle Pyro, we can turn it around. If there's more economic development here, then the UEE will care more, then we'll get more resources, more funds, and we can make it safe, and in turn make the neighboring system safer. And that's their plan. And the Frontier Fighters are like, no, that's going to take too long. You've been trying to do this. All you're doing is sending resources in there that outlaws just steal. You're making the situation worse. Our solution is burn it to the ground. It's called Pyro, let's burn it up. And so they've come in here, and to kind of get the ball rolling, it turns out they pretended to be a Pyro outlaw group called the Slicers. They did a huge terrorist attack on the Stanton system. And then they're like, come on, everyone, let's get those Slicers, and trying to get the whole system agitated. Because they saw what happened when Xenothreat did their attack. They were like, this was good, but not good enough. Let's do it better.
It tells you everything you need to know about these people. the uber racists did a good job, but they didn't go far enough.
Well, as far as agitating Stanton into action,
Yeah.
because Pyro is one of those problems that's so big that it feels easier to ignore. So it's easy enough to be like, it's there, it's fine, and just deal with like, oh, we'll catch this one shipjack or we'll catch this one outlaw, but it doesn't help the larger problem of an outlaw system.
So how did the idea of the Slicers / Freedom Fighter, Frontier Fighters reveal come about?
I believe it was a conversation with design. They were basically looking for they had built this sort of series of missions that were supposed to kind of build up towards the release of Pyro System. And so there was that initial thing of the like, oh, you can pick from these three, and then suddenly they wanted to make it shift to two. So we had to kind of figure out, like, look at kind of their outline of how they wanted to do things and figure out like, all right, well, how can we phase it from 3 to 2? And, basically kind of hit all of the markers that they needed to hit, and then tell a story that could be fun, that would sort of, again, the goal was, hey, Pyro's coming out, we want people to go to Pyro, so how do we incentivize people to go storming into Pyro? And it's been one of the things we'd actually years ago had talked about a similar thing for Xenothreat as well, of them taking over like the jump point station and then fleeing into Pyro. And so it was basically, the Navy gave you the go ahead to go in. So it was like a bunch of missions for players, but it was the same type of thing. Like, you know, figure out a storyline that would ultimately culminate with the invasion of Pyro. And so we sort of circled around this idea of the Frontier Fighters being a much more hardline version of CFP, basically, and then, you know, and talking with design, kind of came up with this hook of turning them into the villains, basically. So turning Frontier Fighters into the bad guys, hence why you had to fall into CFP or Headhunters.
And I'm glad I asked that question because you answered exactly what I was hoping you were going to say.
Thank you.
This idea, looking at the questions in that thread, I think sometimes there's this idea that everything starts with narrative and everything, you know, it's like everybody else in the company has to do what you decide the story is, and that's not the case. It's not the case. This is a collaborative thing, and many people have a voice. Not me, or we'd have Jalopy, but other people have voices where we would like to do this, but that's something that happens quite a lot. Designers come and say, we would like to make this kind of content. We would like to do something like this. Can you help us find a way to fit that into the universe that you've created? And that's a big part of what you guys do day in and day out, like this. So this question came from the chat, and it's in the Meyer was asking, Meyer, I thought better of you, man. Why can't we stay on the freedom fighters side? Why don't you let us be the genocidal terrorists who want to just wholesale slaughter thousands and thousands and thousands of innocent people?
There's a lot of people that want to do that.
Yeah, I mean,
Got to answer your own question.
Yeah, the Frontier Fighters switching into a pure enemy faction, I know some people aligned with them and they wanted to keep working for them, but our idea was always to have them as an ongoing enemy faction for the rest of the story we're telling this year. And, you know, going forward, not every faction that you encounter in the game is going to be one that the players can actively work for. And there are these purely hostile factions, and we need them from gameplay reasons, is that as the reputation system slowly evolves, we want a similar experience for players who always can arrive in a location and have someone to attack or who's attacking them without having to worry about how the reputation system is going to change how they behave or the dialogue lines, because there's a high cost with that. We do want to have some reputation-based gameplay where the player's alignment will affect the outcome or how they experience these things.
Yes.
But that's going to be much more controlled.
It has to be within reason.
Yeah.
It has to be within technical reason, has to be within a feature reason, has to be within time. You know, the amount of time that we can invest into creating different variations. I mean, everybody that's ever played a video game that has branching storylines knows you can only have so many different branches and stuff. Otherwise, it just goes on and on and on, and it becomes impossible. I say that, and then Baldur's Gate 3 was like, hold my beer. You know, shout out to Baldur's Gate 3. But even there are limits, and that's like this. So it's limits in time, limits in technology, limits in functionality, and our own desires. I don't think we're not making a game where you can do absolutely every single thing in the universe. There's a game we learn every week, the game that we want to make. We evolve, Chris evolves, you guys evolve, we all have different ideas every week and whatever, and we start to think, you know, this is the kind of game we want to make and stuff as we see players react and stuff like this. And it's not to say that maybe someday down the road you're not going to be able to join space Nazis or whatnot, but at this moment where we're at,
well, I don't say no.
That's my point. But at this moment where we're at, it's like, no, that's not something we're really looking for.
But again, like, I mean, going back to the sort of the conversation about the guilds that we outlined in sort of the Road to 1.0 thing, like there's going to be a criminal guild. Like if you are looking for that type of, underworld working for the dark side type, characters and interactions and factions and stuff like that. We have that. Like you will be able to work for those people. But
you can be criminals. You can be criminals. You can be pirates and things. It's just it's just a question of how far into depravity we look.
An early version of the reputation system had a lot more factions that you're working for. They were going to be very localized, so that as you traveled from planet to planet, you were starting to build your reputation up. And it turned out like that level of complexity wasn't delivering on the experience that we wanted. So we kind of have pared back so that the factions will ideally have larger differences from each other, so that you're not just shuffling back and forth between like 20 identical delivery companies. Like for 1.0, we want each, company that you work for to have its own vibe, its own voice, and those are going to be the ones, and for you to grow along with them from system to system. So a lot of the factions that we previously thought was going to be Pyro only or Stanton only are going to expand out into the other systems, so you can have a continuous experience as you travel through the star systems. And so I think a part of that is kind of limiting who you're going to be able to grow that reputation with. We're going to have local factions and local people that you can still get paying jobs with and do small mission chains with, but you won't necessarily be earning a permanent reputation with them that's tracked and affects other people. So it's going to be a lot more focused and hopefully deliver a more in-depth experience for those factions that you do work with.
We've mentioned in the past, obviously we spent a long time talking about Pyro and stuff in the lead up. Hopefully Nick's ain't that long. Are the previous mentioned gangs of Pyro
a little hint?
There? Overlords, Fire Rats, the Vipers, stuff like that? Or have the Frontier Fighters and Headhunters just killed them all off?
It's an interesting idea to kind of run with the idea that, Frontier Fighters steamroll their way through some of the other gangs and wipe them out. Again, it's usually that thing too of what you were talking about before, of everything kind of to build the experience that we like, or the standard of quality that we like to ascribe to stuff. Adding those gangs requires support. It requires costumes, it requires voice packs ideally, it requires ship liveries, it requires a lot of stuff that requires other teams to get involved in. So that's why we usually make the distinction whenever we're kind of talking with on this or in the forums and stuff like that is, there's a distinction between the fictional universe and the in-game universe. In the fictional universe, they're probably out still running around, but whether they're represented in the game yet, right now we're not really at a place where we can support putting them in.
But as far as down the road, we have plenty of narrative room to have them show up and start having outposts dedicated to them. And I think it's about, now we've had the character art time so that they have really cool bespoke armor that makes me want to go engage with them and loot them. And right now we just don't have that in the schedule. So
you kind of see it like with the Fire Rats and the contested zones, like kind of how unique they can look. Like the work that they did on that, was really awesome and shows basically where it could go. But I do like the idea of actually saying that, maybe we fictionally kill off one of the gangs, that Frontier Fighters gets a hold of them and stomps them out.
It's also hard because we're dancing around a lot of things because of what's coming later this year, and so it's been the struggle of these kind of shows for more than a decade now.
So we got big things coming later on in the year, big fights, and they're trying to avoid it and telling us at the moment. It's fine, and yeah.
We want to share, but we don't want to spoil, and especially this year. This year has been a big focus on in-game discovery, probably more than any previous year, and that's affected everything from ISC to SCL. It's why there are fewer shows. It's why we don't spoil every single thing. In 2 weeks, you're going to see the show about 411, and there's some rather sizable things in that show that we're leaving out, because again, we want folks to discover it in game. We don't want to. I think a lot of folks sometimes.
That's good. I think it's about time that they did that.
The product of CIG is not these shows. The product of CIG is the game. and whatever. These shows just support and inform about it, but this is not. It's
It gives more reason to be in the verse.
People who've been following along with the lore that we've been releasing for the past, decade, and seeing our development in real time, and they've always been representative of our thoughts at the time and our aspirations of the time. But we've changed, we've grown, and we've learned stuff. So at one point we were going to have all these gangs, and we developed them because that was what the idea was at the time. And now, as we learned, it's like, oh, we want less better gangs, and so we've trimmed pared down to fit into that schedule, or we know how much developer resources it takes to do it to our quality now, and we've had to adjust it. That's not to say that they're cut or gone, they just might not be showing up in the way they've come. And we talk about this with the location lore, having to adjust and change to our new tech, and so I appreciate how difficult it is to be a Star Citizen lore fan and being like, wait, I thought it was this, and then like you told me these gangs were down here doing stuff, and and I don't see them. So I know it's tough.
Plot C4 says, so without spoiling, Squadron 42 is not for this year. No, it's not. We said that at CitizenCon last year.
2026.
It's not 2025. All right, so we got a little bit more time here. I want to do some rapid fire general questions here.
This is different than the lightning round?
Yeah, this one's you can actually answer. Why do criminal groups like to live in piles of trash?
Sounds like a good thing. I think it's a strong visual indicator to players that they're entering an area that's seedy and unwelcoming, is to see trash littering around. I think a lot of times when you're fighting for your life, you maybe have.
Well, it kind of works in real life as well, in some places.
Bar wrapper. Yep. So.
Sorry, Vlaz is like, but what quarter of 2026? When it's ready. How come gangs manage to borrow so many large military ships like the Idris every year? These manufacturers should fire their heads of security.
Well, I mean, just look how many Polarises are flying around right now.
But yes, they should. Their security system is truly horrible.
Has the role of head of security even been invented? Does it exist in the Star Citizen universe? There's some fictional reason security
They're just all
chiefs?
really gullible. They just walk in and they're like, hey, I'm supposed to take that ship out. And they're like, oh, okay. And just
there's some suspension of disbelief that needs to happen to how many times will Orison be taken over and sieged before they would just shut the city down? So it's...
We've had a lot of focus on the Pyro gangs recently. This person would like to ask if you plan to focus on each of the 4 Stanton corporations a little more and their stuff.
Sure. No comment.
Okay. That's going to lead. I'm going to go right into the next question. We have introduced relatively recently, within the last 6 months.
I mean,
Foxwell.
everything's relative.
Yeah. Foxwell is now this new. I guess they're a PMC. Is that how you would classify them?
I would call them a security company. I don't think they're solid enough to be a PMC.
Okay. So Foxwell is out there now giving missions. They seem to be taking some of the role that Crusader and Hurston Security would have in the past. Is that accurate? What's?
Yeah, it's part of our 1.0 alignment as we head towards that goal of, for the major landing zones, it was causing potential issues for players to be able to earn negative rep with these companies and seeing how, I worked for Crusader Security, I pissed them off, I attacked them. What does that mean for me accessing the content in Crusader now? And it had a lot of knock-on ramifications it was really complicating things, having the 4 corporations who control these planets also be reputation factions. So we're going to slowly start changing towards them being more local factions where you can work for them and earn money for them sometimes, but not necessarily keep a long-term reputation with them. Instead, those beginning security jobs are going to be given out by Foxwell. And sometimes the 4 corporations hire Foxwell as a contractor to do the work for them.
And Foxwell, because they're not so obviously linked to the Stanton system, you talked earlier about being able to continue your relationships with some of these people as you progress to different systems. Again, at CitizenCon, we revealed the first 5 systems. After Pyro is Nyx, after Nyx is Castra. I remember that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then after Castra, Terra. So a relationship with Crusader when you're in Castra doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense, but Foxwell is somebody that you can build a relationship with and they can take with you as you progress.
Yeah, that was one of the one of the earlier ideas was like, oh, you're going to have to rebuild your reputation, and we kind of decided that's not what we're gearing for. So we want that reputation to have continuation across systems. So yeah, you start working in Foxwell in the Stand system, and you'll be able to continue working for them in Castra and Terra and stuff like that until you graduate up to a higher tier of security company who wants to work with you now. So.
Okay.
Silence.
Have we seen the last of Xenothreat?
Probably not. They're like a bad penny.
They are a bad penny. Last 2 questions. Why aren't there more non-combat focused storylines?
A good question.
So, granted, we've only been introducing this new story initiative just started this year.
Yeah.
And we're still in the 4th month of this year. So it's not like we've.
Well, technically, it even started, I think, two months. I think we're in month 2 of.
Yeah.
The
I missed the
storyline.
investigation
But it's the
missions.
start of Pyro and stuff like this with the fight for Pyro and stuff. So we're really only 4 or 5 months into this initiative here.
Well,
but the missions have all been very combat. The story has been very combat focused. Even a line in mine, the regen question thing. The first thing you do is go to a big central sandbox where you're forced to fight with a bunch of people.
Yeah, I mean the from a high level, actually the B story, the science story, the regen crisis story is actually the non-combat one because it's science, it needs resources and and the frontier fighters one, which is sort of the A story, that is obviously much more focused around combat. So, but within each of them, obviously there's going to be opportunities to do both combat and non-combat. I mean, again, like I think a lot of the systems for combat have already been sort of proven out. So I think that they're from, you talk to the mission team, but I think they're a bit easier to set up. So it's faster to iterate on a lot of adding a lot of combat stuff versus just mining stuff. But as far as I understand it, like the hope is that we want to have like a very nice balance between the two, that if you don't want to fight, you don't have to fight.
Supply or die, which was kind of a refrain from that A story, a little.
That's one of the things that gets me. I'm not a combat fighter. I much prefer the industrial gameplay. So I'm definitely looking forward to when you get the non-combat missions. I used to love doing the mission where you would go and investigate to find out who was responsible for the Covilex station blowing up and going around finding the data pads and stuff. I still think that'd be quite easy for them to implement. Just don't tell anyone about it. Just let people know that those types of missions are in the game, and then just start leaving data pads around again.
Denouement, where you take a break and we introduce things that could be done completely without combat. You were able to mine your way to completion and get all the rewards, or salvage your way to completion. Now, what other players allow you to do, that is the universe that we're making. But it was not exclusively combat oriented. There was a path for combat and a path where you could avoid it. I think we'll see more of those things as we go on, providing alternate paths to things. As the regen crisis continues, there will no doubt be opportunities for some major combat and stuff, but there will be also ways to contribute that are not. Last question. Just looking through the list here. Two. I'm going to do two. Can I do two more? No, do two more. Sure. I know I said I'd get you out of here early, and I failed at that miserably. What are the Tavaran up to right now? Anything?
Just chilling.
Just chilling.
I think.
hanging out in their nest?
I mean, still the two main storylines that we've talked about in the past is kind of, they're at a bit of a crossroads right now. And where there's a community of Tavaran who've left the UEE to kind of form a new Tavaran homeworld and try to reestablish their culture and really embrace those roots. And then there is a new kind of Tavaran movement about taking their culture and assimilating into the UEE and finding their new place as UEE citizens, and fight for their status of equality and really having a place.
I mean, that was the same as about 2 years ago. So what they're really saying there is they haven't really done anything on the Tavarans just yet.
Really, make a go of it and stuff. And so it's the two of them kind of at odds with each other.
And I think this kind of desire, now that the war is so long past, of returning Tavaran culture back into the mainstream with Asperia's release of these Tavaran fighter ships and other forms of Tavaran culture, which were now being revitalized. It's kind of an interesting way of a combination of humanity and Tavarans working together to bring back these elements of Tavaran society that were lost.
I've wanted the Tavaran eventually in game primarily because I've always wanted to dress my Star Citizen character like Brian Blessed did in Flash Gordon, as a Hawkman.
No, I'm very excited to when we finally get around to Tavaran, because they're my favorite group.
And then the last question I want. We've talked a lot about, obviously.
Just two more questions.
Yeah. You know what? You want a show? You hosted this show, or you're the only other person that has hosted this show. You want to switch seats? We've talked a lot about, obviously, story and narrative and stuff.
Hopefully.
And the limitations that we have as far as how we can tell stories and stuff like this. We are making some progress with that this year. We do recognize that while data pads will always be they're a part of every video game, every major story narrative video game I think I've played in the last 20 years. We do want to progress that more. Can you give us a preview of how we're progressing? What would be next?
I mean, just moving up the food chain. It's audio logs. I mean, ultimately we want to get to be able to do video logs, like all that stuff. Because again, like it's the data pads are great because they're easy, they're relatively cheap, but again, part of the thing with this year has been creating greater engagement, and one of the main methods for doing that is having characters that you're interacting with. And so even if it's a one-sided thing, as far as an audio log or a video log or something like that, it's still you're reacting to a person rather than just reading text on the screen.
Folks have already seen with Wicklow, comms calls are coming back. You start starting to see some visuals, comm calls, and people being able to talk to you and deliver some exposition. Mm-hmm. Folks who are playing 411 on PTU now know there's elements of that creeping into 411 as well, with some of the new mission content that's available in 411, where we're able to have these comm calls come and talk to you. You just mentioned audio logs. I think I'll go ahead and say it is our intention to add audio logs to the game before the year is out. I'll give us a big window there to implement it. But we do want to make it so it's not just picking up things that you have to read. It's things that you can actually listen to and hear to help tell that story. And as we showcased in ISE with the performance capture episode just a few weeks ago, we are moving towards, we want to be able to get some of these broadcasts and stuff on screens and landing zones and stuff, and be able to push out story elements to you that you don't have to go and find yourself. So we're committed to trying to make that work this year.
The person that delivers those as well.
This year and stuff like that, because we are very serious about our desire to tell these stories and improve the methods in which you tell a story. So,
I mean, the change to the new loading screen alone has just given us a nice opportunity.
Oh, that, yeah.
Just a little bit of narrative. Again, it's text reading, which maybe is not as exciting, but the branding team has done an amazing job of doing the art for them. And
things we can do this year without requiring too much feature work, without pulling too many resources away from finishing out Squadron 42, and without introducing too much instability into the PU and stuff like that. It's like I said, it's all got to be managed. It's all got to be balanced within the whole. But we are making those efforts. A few weeks, it was March 13th that episode came out. Well, look at you. You can read a calendar. I'm done. This is my 1,217th video for Star Citizen. I can't keep track. I don't know when the last one was. Cut me some slack, man. Finaro, that was the first comment Finaro has ever made in Twitch chat. and it's to be like, Jared doesn't know how to read a calendar. You've made an enemy today, Finaro. You made one comment. I don't know how long you've been a backer. Maybe you've been a backer for like 11 years. And today you made your first comment in Twitch chat. And you made an enemy today.
I like this side of Jared.
I'm going to melt his ships. Can I do that? Like, not all of them. There's just going to be one that's gone, and you're not going to know which one. You're like, what happened? You're going to think it's a bug. I melted it.
how do you not have a button for that on your desk that you can just press?
All right.
Oh, don't give him ideas.
Folks, thanks for taking the time to be here, for doing this.
Thank you.
As a behind-the-scenes thing, Dave and Will have always been my foundation for these things. Whenever I need something and other folks are busy, folks have to cancel for whatever reason, stuff like that. It's something has to delay because it's not ready to be talked about or shown or whatever. The number of times I've had to go hat in hand to these two people and say, please help me do my job.
It was such a heartwarming statement, but also reinforced that we're never your first choice.
Not wrong, though. Not wrong. So, David and Will, not my first choice. Thanks for watching. We'll be back. Next week with a special behind the ships episode. It was behind the ships next week, right? Yep.
And what day is that?
Where we reveal the first ship that's coming for this year's Invictus just a little bit early. So stay tuned for that. For Will and Dave, again, not my first choice. I am Jared Huckabee. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week, everybody. Take care. Bye.
So yeah, that was the episode this week, and it was quite sort of lore driven. I'm looking forward to next week's with the behind the ships, because everybody likes ships, including me. Let me know what you thought about the questions. Do you think there's stuff that they could have answered that they should have? Should have answered that they could have, rather? Words escape me. It's been a long week. And also, just drop in the comments below. Let me know what you're thinking of the episodes as they go on. And I will react to you there. Without any more wasting of your time, this is Crazy Wabbit. See ya.